the purpose of this book is really to answer all of the questions surrounding Judaism from beginning to end. And how can a small little book answer all questions? We're going to talk about it in just a moment. Psychology came a lot after Kabbalah, but Kabbalah really talks also from a very different perspective. Psychology comes and interviews 100 people, takes their stories, and tries to kind of figure out what's going on with all of the 100 people. What happens if there's a person across the world that has a completely different problem that no one heard about? So there's no solution because the psychologists that wrote the book never heard about that problem. But when we talk about Kabbalah, Kabbalah is written based on Torah, which is a book of God, which the perspective is, what does the Creator have to tell us about who we are? And that's a much more powerful way of looking at it. Because if you open a menu for a machine that you got, instead of starting to press buttons and suddenly something explodes, right? Instead of that, you just open a menu and you read what is this machine and how does it work and what button does what. That's what Tanya is. It's taking Kabbalah in a very interesting way and putting it down in a practical way of understanding the Creator's view on what is life and how and who are we as human beings, as Jews as well, but that's going to be only more at the end of the book. But first of all, what are the three questions that I just mentioned? The first question would be a question that each one asks himself the moment we come into the world, which is, I think, a question that if I simply go around the table over here, the answers are going to be not just different because everyone has a different answer, but a very different perspective of how to look at this question. And the question is, who am I? So if I go around and ask you guys, who are you? Some of you guys might answer, we could do a circle, but that's going to take probably a long time. Thank God, room is full. But if we ask a simple question, who am I? The answer might be Meir, Marcy, Roy, our name, right? Or the name could be maybe what we do. I'm a doctor, I'm a rabbi, I'm a professor. Everybody can use their title to who they are. But the question, who am I, is a much, much deeper question than that. The question, who am I, that we are going to talk about, it's not just the title that we use to describe ourselves. It's not just the name that we were given when we were born or when we chose it at a certain point of our life. It's who we are. What are we? What are we made of? What is there? What are the pros? What are the minuses? Who we are as existing beings in this world, from beginning to end, to understand and look into ourselves. The second question, which I mentioned, is not just a question, it's also a prayer that each and every one of us is asking for, is how to achieve happiness, how to achieve fulfillment with ourselves. And that's, again, not a simple question to come and answer, because, of course, we could go to an amusement park and have a nice day, and we could go on a good date, and we could go and have all kinds of things that bring some sort of happiness to our life. But the question is not here how to get to some sort of happiness. It's how to fulfill the need as a human being to be happy, to be fulfilled, to feel good with ourselves to the best possible, and not just to a swinging level that one day it's here, one day it's there. And honestly, in order to be able to answer that question, we first need to answer the first question, which is, who are we, right? And then the third question is a question, probably the question of questions. The biggest question you could probably find in the world is, why was I born? Why was I born? And why was the world created? And why are we here? What really is going on over here? What's the need of all of this? And that's the question of questions that the Torah has an answer to. And the Torah has a perspective and a way of looking at it, which is going to be fascinating and interesting. And really gives each and every one of us so much of fulfillment and meaning and reason, which we obviously going to learn through the book. Who am I? How do I achieve happiness, fulfillment, happiness? And why were we born? Why were we created? These are not books that Tanya brings, by the way. I have to side note this. These are questions that I'm bringing, or we could bring as part of the class, to understand what this book is really going to give us. What are the tools and purpose that this book is going to give us, which is a lot more powerful than almost any other book that we would learn, not of any other existing ideas, but in one book to have all of that, it's pretty amazing. One of the rabbis that received this book was Rabbi Yitzchak ben Berdichov, and when he received it, he said a comment, how did he succeed? He's talking about a rabbi that wrote the book. We'll talk about him in just a moment. How did he succeed to put such a big God in such a small book? What he meant is, there is no other book that really compresses so many ideas, so many powerful, meaningful ideas about life and the vision of Torah and Kabbalah on life within one book. You could go ahead, I once had an argument. Within Jewish, we obviously have a lot of different sectors and ways of doing things and learning things. So once I had interesting, it wasn't even an argument, I had a conversation with a Litvish boy. Litvish are boys that usually are kind of Jewish people that usually learned in yeshiva all day. And Bnei Israel, there's many Litvish Jewish people. And many of the Litvish mindset believes that there is no, not necessarily believe, doesn't really learn Kabbalah so much. They don't deal with Kabbalah. Mitnagdim, yeah. But I don't think we have today mitnagdim. Mitnagdim means those who are opposition to Chassidut, to Kabbalah. But we'll talk about them also in a moment. I don't think today there's real mitnagdim. Today everybody understands the idea of what Kabbalah is, and no one is really against it. But there's people who, Chassidut specifically, but there's people who avoid learning it. So once I had a conversation with one of them, and I asked him, why would you be against such an amazing book that gives you so many tools and ways of looking at life that you would never find just in reading and learning everything you're learning in one shot? So you have something consumes in such a small book so much. Why wouldn't you learn it? So he told me an interesting answer that to be honest, I didn't continue the conversation because he had a point. His point was, I don't want to learn it in one small book. I want to learn the entire Torah. You might be right that this book is such a powerful and amazing book, and I'm not arguing on that, he said. But even if you're right, I want to get to it myself. So I want to learn everything and learn Gemara, learn Talmud, learn Mishnah, and learn the Chumash, and learn Nevi'im, and learn all of the different books. And eventually I'll understand the view of Torah on life. Because if you learn the whole Torah, if you learn Talmud and Mishnah and Rishonim, Achronim, if you open all of those books, you'll have the vision of the Torah on life. This book takes everything and puts it in one small little book. The Tanya is not even as thick as this book is. You know how many versions of the Tanya were printed in the world? Same book, but just in different places in the world. 200. 200 is a lot. It might be the book with the largest amount of versions. I didn't check that, but it might be the book that was printed the most times in the world. Not printing books, but more like in different places, in different companies. 5,000. The reason why so much, one was printed even in Iran, by the way. Why so much? Because there's a thing by Chabad that if you go to a new place and you're trying to elevate the place, you print Tanya there. So you bring a printing machine and you print big papers with the small pages, and then you send it to a company to make a book out of it. So Tanya was printed over 5,000 times in different cities and places in the world, which is very interesting. Since the time it was written, which is about 240 years ago. So back to our first class. So the questions I brought are really an interesting way of understanding how much this book gives meaning and understanding about life. Just those three questions give us so much. The Rebbe that writes the book, Rabbi Shneur Zalman Miliadi, lived about 240, a little bit more than that, years ago. And he was a student of the Baal Shem Tov. Who's the Baal Shem Tov? The Baal Shem Tov was a Rebbe about 300 years ago that started the concept of Chassidut, Chassidish life. We all know what's Chassidish Jew, right? You go to New York, Borough Park, you see all the Chassidish Jew with the hats, and a lot of them with the payas. Chabad also considered to be a Chassidish movement. And the Chassidish movement started only 300 years ago. And what it was is that a lot of Jews did not have an opportunity to learn. And this Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov, he cared so much about Jewish people, and he himself got to learn a lot in his life. So he would go from village to village and inspire people about Judaism. But he was very different than the rabbis that existed at the time. That the rabbis loved using fear. Like, if you don't do that, you will burn in hell, right? That was their way of getting people to do stuff or come to shul. So Rabbi Israel Baal Shem Tov used the opposite approach of love and connection. And by using that, he inspired a lot of people that never had an opportunity to study Torah to come and become connected to Judaism. And he opened a whole movement within Judaism by him going from city to city, from village to village, and spreading this idea. He had some students, and one of his biggest students was Amagid Mimizrich, which became the next Rebbe. But it became so big that he didn't need to go himself to all kinds of cities to inspire people. He stayed in one place called Mezrich. And from there, his students used to learn from him and go around the country, mostly Russia and Ukraine, and spread the ideas of Chassidut, the inspiring way of Judaism. But that all was really a more, I would say, spiritual kind of thing going on. There was no structure to how this is working. It was all about getting inspired yourself and going ahead and going to inspire others. There was no structure, books to learn. There was no structure, understanding of the Torah that they would teach. You would teach whatever you would learn. The third Rebbe was, so remember, the second Rebbe had a lot of students that went to a lot of villages to inspire people, and some of them moved to other villages to keep those people inspired. And his official continuer, the Rebbe that officially continued him, was Rabbi Shneur Zalman Miliadi, which he is the first Chabad Rebbe. What's Chabad and why Chabad? We'll talk about it in just a moment. But Rabbi Shneur Zalman Miliadi moved to Liadi, and over there he started his group, but he did something very different. He decided it's time to not just inspire people with love and care, but really to take the time to explain Judaism in the deepest way that people could actually understand what does it mean to be Jewish? What does it mean to do tefillin? What does it mean to come and pray on Shabbat? What does it mean to do any kind of mitzvah? And he took his time to step by step explain that to his students and learn it with them. And by doing that, he caused a lot of drama within Judaism. Why? Because no one has ever opened Kabbalah and made it accessible to everyone. And there was a whole group of rabbis that thought that this is very dangerous. A rabbi that on its own decides to start teaching stuff that were not taught until today, he doesn't sit with a board of rabbis and consults with them before doing that, they were very concerned. And they had a good reason to be concerned at the time, because 200 years earlier, there was a very big Kabbalistic rabbi called Shabtai Tzvi. He was very famous, very charismatic, yeah, very charismatic. And many people followed him and believed that he's the Messiah. And he said on himself that he's the Messiah. And he got to the point where he got so famous that one of the Ottoman Empire, one of their person in charge got very concerned because it was a threat to Islam, such a inspiring person going around and teaching stuff to people. So they invited him for a debate. They say he won the debate, but at the end of the debate they left him two choices: to die or convert to Islam. And he converted to Islam, which is a horrible ending because it destroyed Judaism. People were devastated. He was their Messiah, right? And he converted to Islam. And that was a horrible ending to the whole story. And rabbis banned Kabbalah completely in order to keep us from other people that are going to do similar stuff. And 200 years later comes the Rabbi Shneor Zalman Miliadi and starts teaching Kabbalah. So the rabbis who didn't look into him, just saw a rabbi going ahead and teaching Kabbalah without consulting with them, they saw it as a threat and they decided they have to stop it. So they go ahead and they do everything they can to stop people from learning it. And there was a lot of dirty stuff also done. He used to send money to Israel, which was under the Ottoman Empire, which was in a war with Russia at the time, with the Tsar. So he used to send money to poor people in Israel. Jewish people always lived in Israel. Since the destruction of the second temple, Jews lived in Israel. So the real Palestinians are us. But anyway, the Jews that lived in Israel were very poor. Israel had no resources. And Jews from around the world would collect money and send them. And one of the people who did that was the Rabbi Shneor Zalman Miliadi, the first Chabad Rebbe. And as he sends money to an enemy country. Think about you taking that money, sending to Iran, right? It looks suspicious, unless you have a good reason to do so. So that's exactly what was going on over there. And they snitched to the government that he's helping the Ottoman Empire. And when they did that, the government went ahead and took him to check, and took him to investigations. And he sat in prison for 53 days. How many chapters do you think there is in Tanya? 53. Yeah. Chabad believe that this is, and the Rebbe tells us this, that from a spiritual perspective, the fact that he sat in prison was actually, Kabbalah was forbidden not just by rabbis since Shabtai Tzvi. Kabbalah was really forbidden throughout history for everyone to sit and learn. And Shabtai Tzvi didn't really teach everyone even the deep Kabbalah. He was a Kabbalistic person. And so Kabbalah was really forbidden. So a rabbi coming and trying to teach Kabbalah was in a spiritual world, it was a question, does he have the right to do so? So according to the rabbi in a spiritual world, because of that question, he was stopped, which means we know that even though we as human things, we control the world, God decides. We could pull a trigger and the bullet won't come out. And because if that person needs to stay alive, he will stay alive, period. So us doing an action makes us responsible, but doesn't make necessarily the result we choose. We don't choose every single result that comes. God decides what's going to actually happen. And I think I mentioned this story before. I had a friend that was shot twice in Florida. A long story, I won't get into the whole thing. But a bullet went out of it. There was some sort of jam the first time, and the guy fixed the jam and shot again, and there was probably not enough of pressure in the bullet, and the bullet goes out onto the floor. And he succeeded to escape the scene. So things in life sometimes we think we control exactly what happens, but it's not always up to us. If someone's meant to stay alive, he stays alive, right? So the same thing here. If someone's meant to be put in prison, if someone like the Rabbi Shneor Zalman Miliadi gets to prison, it means that there was a godly decision that has to happen. Now these people are responsible to what happened in the way they did it because they made those choices. But in reality, that's what had to happen. And how could it be that such a spiritual person deserved to be in prison for 53 days? So the Rebbe explains to us that it was because of this exact thing. It was a question: is he allowed to continue teaching this? Because it wasn't allowed until then. And in heaven, the decision was made that he's allowed to, and that's how he actually ended up going out of prison. And like I mentioned, it's interesting that there is 53 chapters to Tanya. So that's the background to the book. The background of why he taught the book in such a deep way, it's very interesting. The Judaism at the time was in a sort of a low point. And the reason was because what we call the maskilim in Hebrew. The what? Not the wise, but at the time, the scholars. Scholars, yes. The scholars, with the whole concept of scholars, you could go to a university and get a degree and learn whatever you want and ask questions and explore the world. Didn't start so long ago. Education wasn't available to most people until a couple of hundred years ago. This whole concept that you could go to start to learn and become a scholar, everyone could go and study, is a very new concept. It's only a couple of hundred years ago. Maybe, and if you look in history, only in the last couple of hundred years we succeeded to get advanced as humanity to where we got, right? And that's because schools were not available to everyone. So the whole idea of being able to go and study wasn't so available until recently. And when it started, it created a competition to Judaism. What do I mean? If Judaism would have had the resources and money and time to actually teach every Jewish student, so everything would have been fine. But it didn't. Judaism did not have the resources, time, or money to teach every Jewish child that grew up into a Jewish neighborhood Judaism. No one could go to Jewish school. They had to go, if their father was a I don't know, cutting trees, they had to go help him. If their father had a farm, they had to go help him. If their father was a butcher, they had to help him. There was no choice. Life was very stressful, very complicated, and if you had a child, you had to have him as your help in your work. And only rich people, or people who had their own knowledge and had time to teach their children, rabbis that were able to teach their children, only those two kinds of people were able to actually educate the next generation, which caused the situation that most Jews did not get Jewish education. And suddenly, you could go and become a scholar, not within the Jewish community, and you have where to go and learn. So if you have a lot of questions, if you would ask the older generation, as a religious generation, go to our grandparents, great-grandparents, and ask them, who said that there is a God, right? What would be your answer? Huh? No? No, that wouldn't be the answer. Simpler answer than that. Smack to your face. That's the answer. There was no answer. So they just would hit you for, how dare you ask this kind of question? That's how the older generation was. Because many, many people did not really ask that question themselves. And they never really answered that question to themselves. And they did not have an answer. So the questions, there was no option of asking questions in that generation, except if you go and explore the world. So the Rabbi Shneur Zalman Eliade felt like it's a must to open up the opportunity for people to be able to ask questions within Judaism. But first you have to teach the answers. And that's where Tanya comes in. Tanya was a book he wrote, and he describes in his own words that it's a book that has answers to all questions. Now, how can you answer answers to all questions within one book? I asked this question. So I think the answer is interesting and simple. If you are going to try and learn to be, I like the mechanic example. If you're going to try and be a mechanic, you're going to go, and there's two courses you could take. One course would be, you go with a mechanic to his shop, and he shows you how to change a flat tire, how to fix a broken motor, how to do this, how to do that, or maybe a constructor, right? If you're going to be a constructor, you're going to start and you're going to be shown, this is what you do, this is how you do, this is every single step of the way. Or if you're going to make coffee, same thing. You could learn the technical things that you're going to be doing one after the other. You do this, and if that happens, you do that. But when you learn that way, how to fix every problem, if a new problem occurs, you never know how to solve it, right? There's no way to solve it, because you never learned. Unless you didn't just learn how to fix problems, you learned what's coffee. How does it come? Why does it get the taste that it gets? How does it create the aroma that it creates, right? And the same thing with construction. You learn how there's a building, you learn how a building stands and how it's able to withhold the weight and whatnot. And you understand the structure behind it. Now you yourself can decide one day, how about instead of using metal, we'll use wood. Instead of using wood, we'll use metal. And you could decide different decisions based on your knowledge because you don't understand the problems and the solutions. You know the essence of what is this thing you're dealing with. And now you could look at it as a whole and find your own solutions to problems. And that's what he means. No, there's no answer to every single question in the world in this book. But you're going to understand the depths of Judaism to a level that if you learn this book, you can answer your own questions. You're not going to need an outsider to answer your question. You're not going to need outside of knowledge to answer your question. This has all of the knowledge you need with some inspiration and some calmness and some care to think, but you could eventually find every answer to every question, because you're not learning questions and answers, you are learning Judaism and life in a whole, and now it's up to you to find the answers. What's the words he uses in this book? He uses that this book is coming to teach us Judaism bederech aruka v'ktsara. What's the translation? The long way and the short way. That doesn't make sense. Long or short. He's not talking about two books. He's talking about one book. He's talking about the way that's long, but it's actually short. When you are going to make a barbecue, right? You light the fire. There's this huge fire. Someone who has no experience will come. Oh, look at this. Let's put a steak on. You put a steak on, you burn it. It looks ready on the outside, but the inside is completely rare, not edible. So someone who knows to wait a little bit to the right temperature, and then you put the steak on. Because one way to do things is when you make things look good on the surface, but inside the problem is still there. You know, when you have a headache and you take a Advil, you didn't solve the problem. Maybe you pushed it a few hours away. Maybe it's a headache that's going to go away on its own, and the Advil just helped you go through it. That may be the solution. But it didn't solve the problem. If someone has a headache day after day and he takes every day Advil, that's not a solution. The way to do it is to find out where is the headache coming from and fix it. So you could deal with the problem from the source of it, or you could deal with the symptoms. And that's the difference between a short way that is long, which it seems short. You take an Advil, you're done. Or the long way that is short, which is not taking the Advil, but going through a long process of things happening. And if you think about it, almost everywhere in life we have those two options. We have a problem. We could deal with the problem as it is, the surface of the problem, which it might go away, but it didn't clean the problem. The problem will keep coming back, and we're going to keep taking pills not just in the sense of pills of solving the symptom and forgetting about the actual problem, or we can actually dig into what is the problem. So derech aruka v'ktsara is a long way that's actually short. When you go the long way, you'll eventually end up doing a much shorter way, because the problem will be gone forever. So when we are going to learn this book, don't expect to have fast answers to every question that's going to come up. Like I mentioned, every class is going to have a great beginning and a great ending. So it's not like we're not going to have an ending to every class. But don't expect to have all answers answered within a moment, in a blink of an eye. Everything is going to take time, and and we're going to dig into it to understand it to the depth of it, which will make it so much more meaningful. And every class we come, even if you missed the previous class, it doesn't matter. We will understand so much better and so much more and connect so much more to everything around Torah, everything from Torah. Okay, now we're going to start the actual book, which is on page 27 in the English. The moment before the soul, the human being is born, the soul goes through the one last part before it comes down to the world. And here's what we read. Tanya besof perek gimel denida, mashbi'im oto tehi tzadik ve'al tehi rasha. A moment, a second, a blink of a second before his soul is born, it swears, it's forced to swear, that when he comes down to this world, it's going to be righteous and not wicked. That's the promise it gives. And it confirms that before it comes down to this world. And I want to ask you guys a few interesting questions. These are philosophical ideas, especially when it comes to education, to the next generation, but really in every kind of way we look at life. Where should we set our expectations? Right? If you learn music, if you study music in school, where should you set your expectations? To be the number one musician in the world? Or to be a little bit lower than that? Or maybe your expectation is just to know how to use the instrument. Where do you put your expectations? Do you put it high, very high? Do you put it medium? Do you put it low? Where do you put your expectations? Middle? Non-expectations. Okay, okay, good. But expectations, everyone. So the interesting thing is that the Torah tells us before a soul comes down to the world, the expectations are very high. Tehi tzadik. I'm not saying that that's the way of living, by the way.
I think your goal is high, but your expectation should not be high.
Okay, goal is high. Okay, good point. The expectation is what you expect to.
You know it's going to happen. Like
expectation is you're expecting it.
Yeah, because you expect it's going to happen.
And goal means you're aiming towards something. Okay, so where should you be aiming? So it's a careful question to answer because if you aim too high and you don't achieve it, you're starting to build expectations. That's how it works. You aim too high, you build expectations, some sort of expectations, and it's very hard to keep yourself okay with little expectations. The problem is if you put a goal too high, the expectations also go high, and if you put the goal too low, so you don't expect from yourself, and you're really not going to achieve what you should be achieving. So it's a very specific, it's an interesting balance. But before the soul comes down to the world, the expectation is very high. Tehi tzadik, be righteous. Be righteous is very big. It's not like be okay. Don't hurt anyone. I hear a lot of people, when you talk about life, they say, our goal is to not hurt anyone. And that's a very interesting and honorable goal to remember. But I'm saying that's that doesn't mean to be righteous. Righteous means to be to make sure every decision we're doing, whether it affects others or doesn't affect others, it's the right decision, it's a good decision. It's a very high goal and very high expectation that the Torah has put into us. So first of all, we'll start from understanding that. But another interesting question that I would ask, which I'll bring a very interesting speech. Today would be called a TED Talk. I don't think if it's in the TED Talk speeches, but it's a very nice speech of like 15 minutes that someone gives about education. I'll try giving it to you in 1 or 2 minutes. Beautiful speech. If you ever heard it, go and look for the poker chip speech on education on YouTube. I think you could find it there. He makes an analogy that education is like playing poker. And when you play poker, you have poker chips, right? And you have to decide, are you going to bet poker chips or are you not going to bet poker chips? It's a decision you have to make. And now there's two kind of players. One player has a lot of poker chips, right? He has a lot of poker chips. He's doing well. Everything is good. And another player has his last 5 poker chips. And they're both sitting in that game. And they're going to play very, very different. The one with a lot of poker chips isn't so worried. He sees a good opportunity, maybe not the perfect opportunity. He still bets. He still is able to how do you say when he's lying? To bluff to everyone, yeah. To bluff as if he has good cards. And he's able to put and bet and play and all kinds of moves and everything. But there's another player that has no poker chips. And that's like 2 children are sitting in the same class. One has very high self-esteem. His mom in the morning gave him a big hug, making him feel that he matters to her. His father saw him, gave him a kiss, and they drove him to school with high energy. They told him they believe in him. Last night he saw his grandma. She made for him pizza. I don't know. His father comes in this beautiful Ferrari to school. Everybody are looking. He feels the top of the world. He has a lot of poker chips, right? He's full. That's one child. And he goes to school. Teacher asks, who knows who's the first president of the United States? He's like, Abraham Lincoln, George Bush, George Washington. I think Abraham Lincoln. He picks up his hand. He doesn't care if he's right or wrong. Okay, a few poker chips down. Didn't happen. Nothing happened, right? He has so much more poker chips. It's not ruined in his day that he got it wrong. The other kid, his parents in the morning were didn't have so much patience to him. His father had to run to work. His mom barely saw his father. His mom, the morning went really, really tough. And last night he ate dinner that he didn't want and he complained about it. His mom didn't care. The day before someone in school hit him, no one listened, no one this, no one that. The guy has little poker chips. He's scared that every move he does, he's being judged, what happens, what doesn't happen. When a teacher asks a question, he's like, I think it's George Washington. And he's almost 100% sure, but he keeps his hand down. Because what happens if he's wrong? And the whole class looks at him and starts laughing. He doesn't have the poker chips for that. So that's one situation that what happens with little poker chips. But there's another option. The other option is that you have very little poker chips and you really have nothing to lose. So you go all in every game. Who cares? Whether you win or lose, that's all you got. And that's the kid in school that walks on the edge of the ceiling, of the roof in front of everyone, jumps from high places, does crazy stuff, fights with the teacher in front of the whole class because he has nothing to lose. So maybe this is the opportunity. He has to put all in. Maybe he's going to get some attention. He's going to get something good out of it. Maybe not, but it's at least worth it to try. So that's it. So if you have a lot of poker chips, life is good, right? But if a child has little poker chips in school, the result of that speech is that you need to give your children poker chips. You need to give them moments of self-esteem, make them feel good about themselves, make them happy about themselves. And every poker chip you give them, they have more weapons to use when they have to bet in school. Is everybody going to laugh at me or not? That's the idea of that. But the point to where we are, there's 2 kinds of results when you have little poker chips, when you have low self-esteem, when you look down at yourself. 2 things could happen when you look down at yourself. One is you stop believing in yourself and you're very careful where you're going to invest. So you're sad, you're depressed, you're going slow. That's one option. Second option is you don't care. It doesn't matter. I can do whatever I want. I can smoke, I can drink, I can this, I can that, because it makes no difference anymore. I'm already lost. My life is already screwed. So there's 2 ways of life going where things are down, when things are low, right? When our self-esteem is low. So what do you do? What are you supposed to expect from someone? What are you supposed to try and achieve? High self-esteem, look at yourself in a good, positive way, or low self-esteem, look at yourself as a negative way? It's a very simple question to answer, right? Here's the interesting thing. You open the Tanya. Tanya asks the question. And the Talmud continues. So once they told you that you come down to the world and you have to be righteous and you must not be wicked, the Talmud continues. And you have to remember that even if the whole world is like, wow, what a righteous man you are, what a righteous person you are, you should always remember and think about yourself as if you're wicked. Now that doesn't make sense. For the exact reason we said. Because one of the two. If I think of myself as wicked, either I'm depressed and sad, either I don't care. And I just do, okay, the Torah said I'm not allowed. I'm anyway wicked. Who cares? It's not going to make a difference. So why is the Torah expecting us to think about ourselves as if we're wicked? That's the first question that Tanya is asking. And he brings it from another perspective. He asks it from, first of all, logically, it doesn't make sense to tell someone to think yourself as wicked. וגם יהיה בעיניו כרשע, יראה לבבו ויהיה עצב, ולא יכול לעבור השם בשמחה ובטוב לבב. אם לא יראה לבבו כלום מזה, יכול לבוא לידי קלות חס ושלום. That's the question I just said. I'm just reading it inside. But he said, וצריך להבין, דהתנן אבות פרק ב', ואל תהי רשע בפני עצמך. The Torah, the Talmud, the Mishnah said itself, in clear words, you shall not see yourself as wicked. So again, the Torah in one place says you should see yourself as wicked. You have to always remember you're wicked. And in another place says you should never see yourself as wicked. So we have to understand this. We're not going to answer this now, and I'll give you a little bit of a spoiler. We're going to answer it only in chapter 14, so don't expect an answer anytime soon. We are going to talk about it, however. It's a fascinating answer. But before we finish the class, I'll take from this, what we just learned, doesn't really answer the three questions we started with, but it gives us the first key to get to the answer. Our first question was, who are you, right? Who am I? Remember, the Talmud says, even if everybody are saying you're righteous, you should consider yourself as wicked, right? Now, how does that make sense? Because not what people say is who you are. Not what the things that seem on the outside makes who you are. That's the first key. We're not answering who you are, but anything of the answer that we might have gotten here from asking the question who you are would probably not be right. Because the definition of who you are is not your name, not your title, not your work. It's something a lot deeper that we're trying to find out. So the first key to the answer is we're not going to answer it in the surface. We're going to dig really deep inside to understanding who we are. Second question was, how should we be happy? So the interesting thing is, we mentioned that if you have little poker chips and you bet everything, and you don't want to be sad, what do? You bet everything. So we know that's not happiness. That's the second key we get. Being happy does not mean to not care and to go through life, to survive and not feel. Being happy means to feel a strong, happy, powerful thing. So some things in life are trying to take us away from feeling. You go on a high roller coaster, you're not feeling the roller coaster, you're not feeling everything else. It's the only thing you're feeling now is fear. So it's cool, because you don't have to think about anything else. And the same thing is with a lot of experiences in life. We do it because it helps us not think about everything else. Scrolling on Instagram or TikTok. But all of those things are, we think we're enjoying them, but we're not enjoying them. We're enjoying the fact that we don't need to feel anything else. So not feeling is not happiness. We're not talking about that happiness when we're trying to answer the question of how do we get happy. And the third question to all questions was, why did we come down to the world? So we answered that with the first 5 words of the chapter. Before we come down to the world, there is a plan. We're coming down here, we have to swear, we have to give a promise. There's a reason why we're here. What's the reason? We have a long book to read. But in the meantime, we understand that there is something happening. There is a reason why we're sent down here. We make a promise, we make a commitment. There's a deal down here. And we're just starting to go through this thing. What can we take from this class? We just started. We barely learned anything. What could we take from this class? I think there's something very powerful that we could think of. When Rabbi Shneur Zalman Eliadi, that wrote this book, sat in prison, a very important minister heard that there's a big rabbi, very famous rabbi in prison, and he was Christian probably, and he wanted to talk to a big rabbi that knows the Torah, and he went to prison to visit him. And when he comes in, the Rebbe stands up as if he recognized that was someone very important. He was shocked that he recognized who he is, and he told him, I can feel that there's something special on you. But then he asked him a question. He asked him, when the Torah starts, we have the story of Adam and Eve eating from the fruit that they're not supposed to eat, right? Next thing is, they're hiding from God. Once they're hiding from God, God comes. It says God comes to the field. And what does God say? Anyone remember? Ayeka. Which means, where are you? So immediately the question comes, what do you mean God is asking, where are you? God is going through the trees. Where are you? God knows where everyone is. What is that? Why is God asking, where are you?
Where do you see yourself?
So the first answer he answers him is the answer Rashi responds on the spot. Rashi responds on the spot. God just wanted to make a comfortable start. Like he knows where he is, but he didn't want to just show, here I am. He wanted to first hey, do you want to talk, So that's the ayeka. So he said, I learned the commentaries. I don't need your help to the regular commentaries. I'm asking your rabbi. I want your answer. That's what the minister tells the Rebbe. The Rebbe tells him, ayeka means that God is asking you, where are you? Where are you in your life? Are you actually who you are supposed to be? Are you actually where you are supposed to be? That's the question God is asking Adam, especially after what happened. Because, and I think that the fact that we're sitting here today, whether or not we got to answers, and we don't have yet answers to all of the questions as the book describes, but we do have the question. And having the question is already half of the solution. The fact that we are able to look into the mirror and ask this question, who am I, is already half of the solution and is already beginning of getting towards the solution. If we're not able to recognize that we even need to care about who we are, we might go through life without any kind of meaning. But the fact that we are sitting here today and looking into ourselves and able to ask this question, who am I, and probably carry this question with us, hopefully until the next class, right? You need to become curious. And we are really carrying this question and asking this simple question, who am I? Why am I here? How is everything I'm doing, achieving my goal of being down here in the world, is a simple change of life that we might have just from this first, not even starting class, I would say. So just the question is half of the solution. In the Talmud it says a few times, Yediata machala chatzi tufa. If you know the sickness, it's already half of the cure. You go to a doctor many times and they're searching for months for what's the sickness. That's the biggest problem. You don't know what it is. That's more scary than anything. You definitely can't solve it. You definitely can't cure it. The second you find out what it is, it's already half of the cure, because now it's just a matter of how to deal with it. So thank you, everyone. I think you could see that this is a very different style than the regular classes we had until now. And I would love to hear from you guys how you guys enjoy the class. And hopefully we're going to continue with Tanya, but I also want to hear feedback from everyone, from each and every one of you guys about it.